Welcome to Our Highest Work, a podcast where we are gathering and sharing the very best ideas for spiritually based business success, and where we are gathering a community of wise and loving mutual help around these topics. My name is George Cow. I'm particularly excited about today's episode because we have with us Sharon Salzberg. So let me just kind of read you a bit of her official bio, and then I'll bring her onto the call. I know that there are a number of you who have been quite excited about hearing from Sharon. So Sharon Salzberg is a New York Times best-selling author on books regarding mindfulness, meditation, and right livelihood. Sharon has played a crucial role in bringing Asian meditation practices to the West. In 1976, she established, together with Joseph Goldstein and Jack Kornfield, the Insight Meditation Society, which some of you may have heard of, in Barre, Massachusetts. For several years, Sharon Salzberg was a contributing editor of Oprah's O magazine, and she has been a panelist in many talks, and along with the Dalai Lama, actually. So it's an honor to have her here with us. Thank you, Sharon, for joining us today.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to have you here. So before I ask you my first question, I just want to actually invite the audience to comment. I know there's some folks who are here live, and I just invite you all to comment and ask any questions you have about mindfulness, right livelihood, meditation, bringing a loving kindness into your work, into your business. All kinds of questions like that would be wonderful to ask Sharon. So let me just take a quick look here and. Okay. All right. Let me go on with my first question for you, Sharon, which is, in our podcast and community, we talk about spiritually based business career success. So maybe you could just share with us to begin with how you see mindfulness and loving kindness. How does that apply to business and in business?
Well, I think whatever kind of work one might be doing, whether it's at whatever level, that having a sense of integrity, kind of knowing who you are, despite the ups and downs and the changes that continually happen each day, the praise and the blame and all those things that come your way, knowing who you are and having a way of centering, having a way of coming back to yourself, in effect, is invaluable, because when we come back to ourselves, we come back to our priorities, our values, and our life can start to seem more seamless. Right now, most people would probably describe their lives as kind of cut apart. The way people so often say, I'm one person at work and I'm a totally different person at home, or something like that. And there are ways of feeling more authentic and more whole, even when we're at work.
That's beautiful. Authentic and whole. Yeah, I think that's what a lot of us are hoping for in our lives. Actually, we have a lot of folks here in the audience who are aspiring, business owners who aspire to have a successful business, and sometimes there can be too much business happening even and this is true for folks working in corporate as well. There's some people might consider it not enough separation between the two. So maybe you can share with us your thoughts on that. So, for example, a lot of people who are working from home, for example, they end up, not having a boundary between work and personal life.
Yeah, I mean, to say, you don't want to necessarily have kind of rigid compartmentalization. I don't mean to imply you don't want boundaries, because it's like on one level, our values and how we can relate, like if you have a strong commitment, for example, to compassion, and you realize, that can manifest in my work life as well as my volunteer work or my home life or my generosity to nonprofits, charities. Here too, I'm in contact with people and in communication, so why not use this at work, this time at work, as a means of deepening what is a very strong commitment for me. So in that sense, there's integration, but it's also true that we can identify way too much with our work.
Mm.
And most of us do, actually. I was just at some gathering in New York City, and I noticed the temptation in me to ask right off the bat with people I didn't know, what do you do?
Yes.
And I thought, I can't do that. I just wrote about that, like, how we don't ask people upon meeting them, what cheers you up, or, have you had an okay day, or what's your favorite color, or anything. We say, what do you do? And so there's this tremendous kind of over-identification with work, and we are more than that. We're bigger than that. We want to bring that bigness to the workplace, but we don't want to lose it in our sense of who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to take a quick moment to send a shout out to those who are live and commenting away. Thank you, Tomar and Deborah and Charisse and Shweta and Bob. Thus far, I can see the comments from you all. And also, what you just said, Sharon, about what you just wrote about. A couple episodes ago on this podcast, I talked about your most recent book, Real Happiness at Work, and I shared some of my favorite nuggets from the book, and I feel like I was only able to touch on, maybe 3 to 5% of the book, and so I do encourage everyone. Those of you interested in bringing more mindfulness and compassion, resilience, and loving kindness to your work, to go and read that book. It was really wonderful. I've got a comment here, which I guess maybe you could speak to, Sharon. A comment from Tomar Levine. Actually, she lives in New York City as well, and Tomar says, it seems like it must take a lot of dedicated practice to stay mindful during the workday. It's so easy to get caught up in work tasks and goal-oriented actions. And I would even add to that sort of work attitude, sort of like a very stern and anxious, anxiety-producing work attitude. So, Sharon, maybe you could speak to that a bit.
I think nobody realistically is going to stay mindful at work. I think that that may be an unfair goal. I think that one of the things we learn in meditation practice anyway is the tremendous importance of being able to begin again. You have maybe an object of awareness like the feeling of the breath, and which was the first way I started meditating. That was the first instruction I got when I went to India in 1970, and I began in January of 1971. It was sit down and feel your breath, and I thought, this is stupid, And I thought, how hard can this be? And to my amazement, it wasn't like 9,000 breaths before my mind wandered. It was like 1 or 2, and I was really shocked, and it took a long time to believe the instruction that I was hearing, which was that the most important moment in the whole process is after you've been gone, after you've disconnected, after you've gotten distracted, because that's the moment we practice letting go and we practice beginning again. So that's like a resiliency skill right there, and that's what we bring into our lives. And so in the work, in sort of imagining the workday, we don't really think about being mindful every single moment. We think about taking moments, like creating some space now and then, kind of puncturing the crazy momentum and the busyness and the ways we can disconnect with these moments. And so some people call it purposeful pauses. Other people call it mindful moments. And so those, I think, can be ritualized, like all those exercises, like don't pick up the phone on the first ring, let it ring 3 times and breathe. Then you pick it up. That gives you some space. Write out the email and maybe don't press send right away. Breathe. Then read it again and then decide if you want to send it. Don't always multitask. One of the great myths of our time is that if we multitask, we'll get more done and we'll do it well. And it turns out studies show we're not doing either. We're not getting more done. And we're not doing things that well. And every once in a while, it may not be at all realistic for the whole day, but every once in a while, unitask. Don't necessarily drink that cup of coffee while checking your email, while on a conference call, while having the TV on mute. reading the crawl, just drink a cup of coffee. For one thing, it'll be a much better cup of coffee. It'll be much more fulfilling. And you'll feel settled. You'll feel centered. And maybe you get drawn again into the restlessness or the agitation. But you have the tools, even just for a few moments, to come back to yourself. Now, I'm a great fan of daily meditation practice in a dedicated way, because I think that's what really helps us remember when life is more intricate, more complicated, we're at work or with our family, whatever it is. If we've put in 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes of dedicated practice that day, we are so much more likely to remember, not to pick up the phone on the first ring, or to listen really well to somebody instead of thinking about the email we need to send as they're talking. And so I think both are really good. These short moments throughout the day, and also kind of the anchor of a regular practice if you can do it.
That's great. That's great. Something that's prevalent in all of our lives these days, or many of us, especially the ones in our audience here, is social media. So interacting on Facebook, maybe on Google or YouTube or Twitter, etc. Do you have any suggestions or thoughts on how we can do that with more mindfulness?
Well, of course, people so often talk about boundaries in that realm and having some structure, and maybe not tweeting during every meal. I have a friend. We have this kind of running joke. Whenever we're meeting for dinner, we don't talk to each other, but we tweet out to the world, "Oh, having dinner with so and so. Oh, I'm having dinner with so and so. Very interesting." And then of course we talk, but it's just like this game we play, saying, okay, we're going to let the entire world of our world, our realm, know that we're together, rather than paying any attention to one another. So here it's like doing a fast. It's saying during meals I will not also be, or during this time. Or I was recently in Hawaii on Maui co-teaching a retreat, and I noticed for the first time in like forever there was nobody in the dining room pulling out their phones, because we're in Hawaii and people actually wanted to pay attention to where they were. And then I think, there's certain rules of kindness that we forget very often when we're one step removed, because it's a virtual connection, and those might well be remembered. Even in email, people suggested to me, because a lot of the suggestions in the book came from people and their own very personal and direct experience. Someone suggested, well, maybe write out that email and send it to yourself first, before you press send to the other, and get to see what it's like to receive a communication like that. What does it feel like? How is it to be on the other end of this? And we might actually try that with some other things as well.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting, because sometimes we look at our email after we've gotten a reply, and we kind of look at what we originally wrote.
Yeah, it's true.
And we were like, oh gosh, I should have said it that way instead. So just taking a quick look at those who are commenting here. Thank you, Bob and Cherise and Catherine and Barbara's here as well, and Kent. So thank you all so much also. So, Sharon, something you said earlier about how when you catch yourself out of the moment, out of the mindfulness moment, that's kind of the work. A lot of us, that's an interesting perspective, or that's a great perspective, because a lot of us, because we've been raised that when we make the mistake, that's when we punish ourselves. And when we make the mistake, that's when we blame, punish, or just say, screw it, I've already messed up today, and So maybe you could share a bit about your thoughts on that.
Well, I think it's a very, very profound issue, because I think many people say we'll approach meditation practice with the same kind of acquisitive mode we approach other things in. We think, oh, well, if I get a big insight early on, I can stop doing it, or, I need to have something to show off, or whatever it is. And it's just the kind of habitual conditioning that we have. But meditation actually operates in a very different way. It is the most important moment of all after you've been distracted, because that's the moment we have the chance to be really different. So instead of blaming yourself and haranguing yourself and feeling like a failure, we practice gently letting go. It's what one of my teachers once called exercising the letting go muscle. And we practice beginning again. We realize I can start over. And that doesn't mean you don't learn from your mistakes or you don't recognize them as mistakes, but I think if we really honestly look at how we make progress in anything, first of all, nothing in life is a straight shot. We go forward, we fall down, we have to get up again, on our own or with the help of others. And we have a certain aspiration, we lose sight of it, we need to renew it, and we make a mistake, we have to begin again. And so the meditation is like a training in life, because we take that ability to forgive ourselves and go on right into our life. I was, right after the book came out, this last book that I wrote, I was teaching in New York City, and I spoke about that, how we can use the meditation training as this kind of template for life. And somebody objected, and to what I was saying. They raised their hand and they said, well, if I were to practice self-forgiveness when I make a mistake, then I would just get lazy. I would say, it doesn't matter, I'll make another one tomorrow. It doesn't matter, I'll forgive myself again. And I said, I don't think so. Let's look at what really happens in our bodies, emotionally, psychologically, when we go on one of those tirades against ourselves and we feel like such a complete failure. And we lose perspective. It's not like you say, yeah, that was a mistake, I have to learn, I have to make amends, or whatever it is. It's more like we say, I'm an idiot and I can never do anything right, and we lose sight of maybe there were 5 good things we did the same morning even, but they're gone. We just collapsed into the mistake, and how terrible we feel. And if that's what we do, and especially if that's what we do for some length of time, then we end up exhausted and demoralized, and we don't have the kind of energy, we don't have the juice, just to go on and say, I want to try to be different. And so I think if we really put ourselves in a kind of active imagination and relive what it's like when we get lost in that much judgment, it's not a great way to make progress in anything.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I want to switch gears a little bit to the topic of right livelihood. This is a lot of what we talk about here on this podcast. Is our highest work is the name of this, and right livelihood is one of the very important aspects of that. Can you share with us your thoughts on right livelihood? So the term right livelihood, just to give everyone a context, came from one of the Buddha's teachings about the, am I right, the eightfold, the eight noble, the eightfold path. And but the Buddha didn't say a whole lot about it. So maybe you can share with us your thoughts on how right livelihood is applied today.
Sure. Well, I think first the context of the Eightfold Path is really interesting, because in terms of the Buddha, it's not like moralistic, it's not a question of condemning certain things. He, as he said, I think so beautifully, he said, I teach one thing and one thing only, that is suffering and the end of suffering. I teach one thing and one thing only, that is suffering and the end of suffering. So, that means many things, including we need to acknowledge our suffering, according to him, in order to work through it, but also it's a kind of grid. It's the way we evaluate. It's the way we measure things. Does this lead to suffering, more suffering, or does this lead to the end of suffering? So that's our actions, the forces that come up in our mind. We see, we're filled with greed and or jealousy or hatred. We can look at it in that light. Does this lead to suffering, or does this lead to the end of suffering?
Mm.
And the same with, beautiful things like wisdom, love, compassion. Does this lead to suffering, or does this lead to the end of suffering? So that becomes the measure for everything. So even some people don't like that translation, right? Right effort, right livelihood, because they think it implies more judgment than the Buddha intended. But I'm used to it, and it's the one I always use. It's certainly the classical translation. Right effort, right livelihood, right thought, right intention, all that. So I think it's just even using the word right, which I always do, it's useful just to bear in mind that it's not like good and bad, it's suffering and the end of suffering. So I always also found it very interesting that here's the Buddha laying out 8 components of a path that he says are the key to the end of suffering, which is a pretty big deal. And so the fact that livelihood has a place there, it's like 1 of 8. That's kind of remarkable.
Mm.
And so really, of course, the Buddha was talking in a certain historical context and a certain time, and so what he was saying, in effect, was that, your livelihood is important. It matters what you do with your life's energy in that way. And if what you're doing is exploitative or harmful, then that's going to be a significant obstacle for you or challenge for you on the path to the end of suffering. And so, but of course he was speaking in that time. So what did he say? He said like no hunting, no fishing. What that means in our time, people always ask that. I work for a company that is creating, devastation environmentally or something like that. Is that wrong livelihood? Or I work for a company that insists that I lie. What does that mean? And I think that's one of the interesting things about our time, and it's kind of the work you do, is trying to see what does it mean for us now, here, in this society, and with these challenges. And it's like, you and the people listening to you, it's like you're all pioneers in trying to map out what livelihood and right livelihood could mean for us right now.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'll just give an example, and I'm sorry, you might hear my cat in the background.
Hello, cat.
Yeah, he knows about right livelihood. He naps a lot. One of the examples that from my own life just very recently was that for about 5 years I was deep into the idea of affiliate marketing. Just basically, I often shared links with my audience that if they clicked on that link and eventually bought, I would make some commission from that. It's very prevalent in the online marketing, internet marketing world. And I started noticing that I was suffering. And this is actually one of those things that so many people are suffering, they don't even know it, right? And I didn't even know that I found myself always questioning, gosh, if I'm going to promote someone, if I'm going to send a link about this resource, I better find an affiliate link. Otherwise, I might not make some money. I might be leaving some money on the table. And I found myself going, God, that's just, it's suffering. And I just finally came to the realization, no, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm going to experiment with not sharing affiliate links and just sharing purely because I think others will benefit from it. And I'll tell you, Sharon, I have become so much happier.
Yeah.
And I have become so much more creative as a result. And of course, the interesting benefit is my audience trusts me more.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to do that, but it just happened, And that was an example of where I started to notice suffering that I didn't even was cognizant of before.
Yeah, no, that's fabulous, and it's so funny because not like 10 minutes before you called me, I got an email from a colleague of mine asking if I would send out a link to my email list for a program that he's about to do, and telling me that I could be an affiliate and that I would make some money if anyone on my list bought the program. And I wrote back and I said, well, first of all, I've promised everyone on my email list they will never receive anything other than my schedule. I'm happy to use something like Twitter, which I'm off and on, to announce the program, but I don't want to be an affiliate because I always feel that needs to be disclosed up front, and that just changes the message.
Yeah.
You know, I'd rather just tell people that you're doing this program. It has nothing to do with my getting any money from it.
Yeah.
Or not. So I had just sent that email when you called. It's very funny.
Yes. No, it's becoming more and more prevalent for those of us who do want to reach audiences online, this idea. Money starts seeping into so much of it, and I came to a realization recently that, you know, if I'm clear where I make money and where I refuse to make money,
yeah,
I'm happier.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple of great questions from the audience, and I'll just kind of go through them one by one. The first one was actually posted yesterday by Tord Helsingang. He's a meditation mindfulness teacher in Norway, and he asked, sometimes the stress and pain that someone experiences in a workplace is a healthy reaction to systemic and organizational problems, such as inhumane work conditions. So how do we, as coaches, healers, and trainers, meet these problems when we are working within these corporations and businesses? And he clarified today his question to say, you know, how do we approach the potential conflict with the corporate culture? How do we ask unpleasant questions?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, you know, I mean, it's a little bit tied into the question of what is happiness at work, you know, which may not be the same as feeling good, and it may be more like what I was calling before feeling whole, like feeling we are who we are and feeling some sense of integrity. You know, like I found that as soon as, say, that book came out, Real Happiness at Work, people were challenging me and saying things like, well, we don't call it play, you know, we call it work. If you're supposed to have fun all the time at work, we call it play. And I thought that was very interesting, you know, like, why does happiness mean having fun all the time? I also don't think of happiness as something superficial or selfish, because if we feel depleted, exhausted, overcome, broken inside, there's not a lot of wherewithal inside of us. There's not a lot of resourcefulness inside of us to care about others, to try to help others, to even pay attention to others. It's like we're gone, you know, and so our own happiness is like that inner resource that can help us continue to connect and to care and to give and so on. So, you know, it's not that everyone is going to enjoy their workplace in the sense of having fun, and there can be some very real problems. People sometimes think like if you're being mindful, it means that you don't seek change because you're just accepting things the way that they are. But I think absolutely you do seek change. Maybe you look for another job, or maybe you look for another environment, or maybe there's things within the social structure of the workplace you can affect, you know, that you're not as powerless as might appear. And sometimes you can't move. It's a little bit like the serenity prayer, you know, give me the insight to whatever it is, change the things that I can change, and, you know, whatever it is, be peace with those I can't, the wisdom to know the difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, so we do try to change things, and yet, especially in these times with this economy, people often say, I cannot be looking for another job. I have to be in this one differently right now. And if that's the case, or for whatever reason you feel that that's the most skillful and appropriate thing to do, why go down, you know, with the shift? It's like you can find resiliency and creativity and compassion and ways of being in some very difficult situations. Maybe it's through mentoring somebody, or maybe it's through the quality of communication you commit to. I was speaking recently, and I've occasionally asked people, can you recount a really happy time for you at work? And somebody raised her hand, and she said, I work in a call-in center fielding customer complaints. And she said, I love everybody. I listen to everybody. I know that by the time they get to me, they've talked to 3 or 4 people already. They're so frustrated. They're beside themselves. She said, I'm really honest. If I say I'll get back to you by 3 o'clock, I'll get back to you by 3 o'clock. And she said, I can't always help people in a sense of getting their problem solved, but I can really treat them well. And I swear this woman was radiant. And I was looking at her thinking how unlikely it was, having been a complaining customer myself, that she could find that kind of connection in that setting. But it was very personalized, it was person by person, contact by contact. And I thought, look at that, she's clearly fulfilled, even if this was not the job of her dreams. She created something really quite wonderful within it.
Wow, that's a great story. So the next question is from Shweta Parmar, and she asks, Sharon, why do you feel it is so difficult and challenging for people to meditate and be mindful in the day-to-day?
Well, I think it's difficult to take the time to formally meditate, but I think it's really important. I mean, neuroscience these days tells us that there is probably a kind of threshold amount of time, like a dose, and that if we exceed it, it's even better. But and that minimum was not so large. It was something like 9 minutes a day. Seems to be creating some substantial and significant changes in one's brain. And remember, these are only the measurable changes. We don't know what is happening toward the good that is not or could not be measured. But I don't think it's that healthy to go toward the bare minimum even. But if you can find the time to do 5 to 20 minutes a day, your life will change, and it will be all toward the good. And so it's very hard. It's ironic because no one is saying you've got to do this 18 hours a day for it to have any effect. It's not that long a time to commit to, but still, it is very, very hard. It's hard for a number of reasons. For a lot of people, it feels selfish. People say, you should see my to-do list. I've got so much to take care of. Why should I just sit there and do nothing? Or we can have a big habit of judgment. It's not working. I got sleepy, or I had too many thoughts, and it's working if you're doing it. It doesn't matter what if you're sleepy or restless or you have a lot of thoughts or no thoughts. If you're actually putting your heart there, it's working. And you see the results, maybe not sitting on a cushion, but you see the results in your life. How you speak to yourself when you make a mistake, how you meet a stranger, things like that. So even though it is genuinely difficult, I know that, still it's very important. And I think if we're realistic about what we can commit to, my friend Joseph Goldstein did this resolve once. He said he wasn't going to go to sleep at night until he'd at least gotten into the meditation posture. So that's like a 10-second commitment. And so he said sometimes it was just like that. That it would be the end of the day, he'd forget all day long, and then he'd remember, I have to do this before I go to sleep, and he would just like sit down. And it was great, because that's the hardest part, is getting yourself to start.
Yeah, absolutely. So Sharon, you have written a number of books over the years. I have personally read Loving Kindness, which I loved. It was something I read a couple years ago, and it was just transformational for me. And most recently, I read Real Happiness at Work. And I guess I'm going to ask you a question about being a writer. We have a number of aspiring writers in our audience. Some are bloggers, some are, just wanting to write books. Do you have any advice on succeeding as an author, as a writer?
I actually found that blogging was a tremendous help to my writing because I have several significant weaknesses as a writer. One is structure, but the other is because when I'm writing about our subjects that matter so much to me and are so profound, love, faith, compassion, things like that, that I would tend to get kind of overinflated a lot in writing. And if I was blogging, it felt like that was less formal, it was less didactic, it was more communication of the heart. I was just saying it. And like people, as I was struggling along, coaches would often say to me things like, just tell the truth, just tell the truth. Just say it like you see it, and don't do that extra thing of trying to convince people or sound flowery or something like that. Just say it. Like you were just talking to somebody, and I think that's the essential element is just tell the truth, just say it, and then see what happens from there.
That's great. Thank you so much. You've of all the books you've written, which one? And I was like asking which one's your favorite children. But which one would you say you felt most flow in writing?
Flow in writing. Oh, probably Real Happiness. Real
Happiness. So there's two books. There's Real Happiness, which came before Real Happiness at Work. Okay, I haven't read Real Happiness yet, so I'm going to go and read that next.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm just taking a quick look to see if there are any other questions from the audience, and folks have been just enjoying the talk so far, and I don't see any questions that are yet unanswered. I'm sure they're going to come quickly after we end, right? But maybe you can share with us what you are working on next that you would love for people to know about.
Well, I've kind of just finished the official book tour for Real Happiness at Work, and so I am back more or less to my teaching life. As it regularly is. I mean, one of the things I'm amazed at just in terms of the culture in general and also in terms of Real Happiness at Work is how many, say, companies or organizations are saying, I want to try to bring this into my place of work. And so, teaching in various places, which is very exciting. And really interesting. I'm going to Ireland in May through a program of this place, the Garrison Institute in Garrison, New York, bringing tools of yoga and meditation to international humanitarian aid workers from different agencies, and that's very exciting. It's just kind of seeing the applicability of these tools in extremely high stress, high suffering, high nobility, high compassion situations.
Wow. And where would you like folks to find your updates and your work?
I will have a website, which is just SharonSalzberg.com. The mysterious thing is that Salzberg is spelled with an E, not a U. It's not like the city. It's Salzberg. And we keep that updated with my calendar and fun stuff, too, that goes up there, audio and blogs and stuff like that appear in other places, and then we repost them on the site.
Great, yeah. I will be sure to link that in our show notes, and I know that you're also active on Facebook. I follow you there as well, so I'll be sure to put a link to your Facebook fan page there. Well, Sharon, anything else you want to share before we close this call?
I don't think so. I think that's great.
Okay, Great. Well, actually, I'll ask you one last question. Which,
Sure.
Given that our show is called Our Highest Work, what comes to you in thinking about what our highest work is as human beings?
Oh, I think it's making a difference even for one person.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much again for your time and sharing your heart and your wisdom with us. We look forward to seeing more updates from you, and I'm going to check out that Real Happiness book. So thank you again, Sharon. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye for now. So thanks, everyone, those who are able to join live for this show. Really appreciate your comments. Barbara, Bob, Tomar, Shweta, Tord, Catherine, Charisse, Deborah, Kent, and I know others who are joining who couldn't comment. The wonderful thing about this is you can hear it again, listen to it again, and listen. I bet the second time you listen, you'll hear something different. You'll learn something new. So until the next episode, I wish you well, and keep your thoughts positive, and keep your heart open. Bye for now.